Well, here we are again. I'm not sure whether this is Groundhog Day or whether it's the little engine that keeps on trying. I'm not sure whether it's total disrespect for this house or whether it's actually a really creative attempt to address the terrible problem we have with the falling numbers of police in New South Wales by trying to make everybody in New South Wales a policeman. Anybody who's got an iPhone in their hand, you too can gather evidence and you can send it to the law enforcement agency of your choice. It opens up so many opportunities for creative Christmas presents. Instead of the little magnifying glass and the badge in your police kit, you can have a recording device and you can actually have a web address where you could send your illegally recorded information to the law enforcement agency of your choice. Imagine everything that everybody's going to do at drones. I would be very careful to be walking around anywhere in the first couple of weeks of January. You know what it's like when kids get their drones and they're taking photos of everything. Now they'll have somewhere to send them to. Frankly, what this bill is doing, what I'm suggesting isn't even ludicrous. In fact, it's just quite likely to be the outcome if this bill is passed in its current form. I am very tempted to give exactly the same speech that I gave a couple of weeks ago, because frankly, we've been presented with exactly the same bill. And the arrogance of a government that is not prepared to listen to the really genuine concerns that have been raised about the infringement of personal liberties that this bill represents is extraordinary. The question in this bill is a question that almost every society has to answer. Where is the balance point between the needs of law enforcement and the rights of the citizen? Totalitarian regimes with law enforcement agencies such as the Stasi, the Gestapo, the NKVD, the KGB and the IRGC, they find that question all too easy to answer. The enforcement of the law, or what passes for it, is the only consideration. But in a democracy, the balance point is and should be in a very different place. And this is the issue that we really need to seriously consider in this bill. Where should the balance point be between personal liberty, individual freedom, and the needs of law enforcement? We have already systems in place that have been carefully argued and carefully balanced for what would otherwise be illegal to be used in evidence. The best example, of course, and the one with which we're all familiar, is the use by the police of warrants. If they want to enter premises and record information, they need first to go to a judge, satisfy an impartial third person, not be the judge in their own cause, and seek permission according to the law. And in fact, if the warrant that they sought was to record information, but did not also ask for the other illegal act of trespass to be permitted, the information that they gathered from the recording, as we're all familiar with in cases such as Coco and the Crown, has been ruled by the High Court to be unusable and illegal because it exceeded the permission that was given in the warrant. That is how carefully balanced our law is in respect of this. Yet what we have here is a bill that would say, go and record anything you like, send it to the law enforcement agency of your choice, which seems to be an ever-growing list, and then that law enforcement agency will decide whether or not it's in the public interest, undefined. I think there's a first question before we even get to that. Is it in the public interest? Do we really want to live in a state where every time we walk past somebody who has a phone in their hand, we're worried we're being recorded and it's going to be used against us? Where every time we make a phone call, we're worried somebody has us on record at the other end and it's going to be used against us? is that really in the public interest? I struggle to see that it is. We have had a balance in this state for decades in the Listening Devices Act in relation to recording private conversations using material in law enforcement. This bill would seek to totally upset that, frankly, without giving us a lot of good reasons why, other than, well, law enforcement needs it. Of course, law enforcement needs appropriate tools, but we have always, in a free, civil and democratic society ordered by the rule of law, accepted that there are limits on law enforcement. These limits are really important, and these limits have to be carefully maintained and balanced. As I said, I have really addressed the substance of this bill and the many problems that it has on a previous occasion, because those problems remain unaddressed. And I do hope that this is an opportunity to seriously consider the amendments that we are moving that will go some way to improving this deeply flawed legislation. But the one issue I really want to focus on, which is just unaddressed by this legislation, is provenance. Anytime police get a warrant, there is a chain of custody. There are affidavits. It is proven how that information was obtained, the circumstances in which the information was obtained, who has had access to it until it comes to be used and tested. And if that chain of custody is broken, significant questions are asked and need to be answered about the authority then of that evidence. I am very bad at modern technology, but I could take a photo of anybody in this place, stick them through a Nudify app and say, oh look, this person was naked and exposing themselves to me. Who's checking that when I submit that to a law enforcement agency, that that's actually accurate? I dare say at a pinch, I could probably splice two conversations together. Actually, I would get one of my kids to do it. They would do it much better than me. And then I just hand it off. And in splicing two separate things together, totally destroy the context of each separate conversation. And we are just at the dawn of what AI is going to allow us to do. If we are making this significant change to the balance of law enforcement and liberty in our society without seriously engaging with technology, with AI, then we are creating problems for ourselves. And the people who will bear the burden of those problems are those who, for whatever reason, somebody has decided to weaponise information in relation to, falsify information in relation to, and they as an individual will have the burden of proving that it wasn't them. How does anyone in this place prove that they were never naked and exposing themselves in my front yard? I don't know how that's possible, especially if they didn't carefully think to take a photo of themselves fully clothed on the same occasion for posterity. These are serious issues. These are serious flaws with this legislation that must be addressed. One of the amendments that we are suggesting looks to having an impartial person making this determination about public interest, akin to the warrant system that is in use. The Attorney-General has been very dismissive of this amendment, suggesting, oh, look, there were people who raised that in the consultation, but other people said it'd be a lot of work. And, we really think, gee, it's a lot of work to have to ask a judge for a warrant. How much work is the protection of our rights from illegal intrusion worth? How much work is the protection of our personal liberty worth? I don't want the Stasi answer. I want the answer based on the rule of law and the freedom of the individual, a proper balance between the needs of law enforcement and our right to privacy, dignity, and to protect ourselves from illegal intrusion.